Hello, guys. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia, and together with me is my friend Pramod Buravalli, my host and friend Pramod Buravalli, and we are very excited to present to you because we have a distinguished guest whose books we've read, and we've interacted with him over Mind interviews and many discussions on Twitter. But we're very happy to have him join us on this new edition of Mind Podcast. It is Mr. Vikram Sood, who was the head of the R&AW from 2000 to 2003. Right now, he's the advisor to ORF. He was in public service for almost 4 decades, is an author, strategic analyst, has written most recently, in 2018, his book was published, The Unending Game, and his most recent work is in 2020. I'm not going to talk about it right now. I'm going to first have Mr. Sood give a brief, opening statement, and then we'll talk about his recent book and a lot of discussions that we're going to have on this podcast. So welcome to Mind Podcast, sir. Great to have you.
Thank you both of you, Pramod and Aadit, for calling me over for this discussion that you've organized.
Absolutely.
Me. And it's a great pleasure to be with you.
No.
And I hope you ask the right questions and I give the right answers. And there is no...
Aadit plans post-Diwali fireworks in a very sly manner.
Yeah.
So first, the first I have to ask, sir, how is this journey, right? You went from advisory position to the Unending Game, to the public service for 4 decades, and then now at this stage you are at the ultimate goal. So can you describe that service? Like what did it take?
It took nearly 50 years. Well, not 50.
Yeah.
Well, yes, 55 years actually.
Yeah.
That's when I began my career in 1966. And I had no idea I was going to be going into espionage and intelligence activity at that stage.
Right.
And so 71 the call came, and 72 I joined the R&AW. And continued there till I retired.
Yeah.
And after retirement, I had no plans what to do with myself.
Right.
Till I got into the business of writing, op-ed pieces in the local newspaper, the Hindustan Times, to begin with. That continued for a while. From there, I branched on to others. Then I joined the Observer Research Foundation in 2005. And I've been with them since then.
Yeah.
And as I continued my activity of writing articles, then I moved to writing chapters in books. Then I even did editing of books, with co-editing with other colleagues. Once in Soviet Union or Russia, and one with the Stanford. So then the idea came, why shouldn't I do a book on my own, and instead of just writing articles? And that's how I moved into my first book, the Unending Game, which was in tradecraft. It wasn't about R&AW. It wasn't about an intelligence. It was about how the trade operates, and how others do it, meaning thereby we could learn something from that. And then when I was doing that book, I had a chapter called Controlling the Narrative, and I left it at that. So when the publisher said, let's do another one, that's when this book came into being.
So if there was ever a Pandora's box for intelligence, spycraft, and so forth, controlling the narrative is a huge sort of Pandora's box. Because controlling the narrative was in a sort of a national sense when you were in the R&AW, and it was a global world, but it is more global right now, 2 decades from now, with the advent of social media, with breaking news. We were just talking that 2 weeks ago, the US elections were taking place, and the whole world was watching every single single vote being counted and cast, right?
Mm.
20 years ago, I don't think or maybe 30 years ago, on a minute by minute basis, I don't think people would be sort of following this.
No.
So how did the whole controlling the narrative portion also change from where you were to what you see right now?
When we were at school,
Huh.
yeah, 60 years ago, 70 years ago,
Hmm.
there used to be one newspaper that we read at home, The Statesman.
Mhm.
And there were others, but my father said only The Statesman would come home.
Hmm.
And we had only one radio station, All India Radio,
Yeah.
which gave us news in the morning, afternoon, evening. There was no 24-hour news.
Right.
And the only thing as a boy I read was the sports page and the cartoons.
I always started from the back.
We all went through that. We all went through that phase.
Oh.
So, and at school, surprisingly, there was no history.
Huh.
Because, when I joined school in 1949, there was no history but British Indian history.
Right.
And nobody knew about Indian history.
Hmm.
And no one taught us that.
Right.
It was only in college that one got a little bit of idea about history. And when I joined service, in 62 we had the China War, 65 the Pakistan clash.
Right.
I was at college in both in that period. And we could see how we felt things were going and how the Pakistanis were reporting and how the world was viewing. There were three different kinds of views. I remember the Time magazine called it 3 third-rate countries fighting wars. Something to that effect. Or 3 third-rate armies fighting a war.
Yeah.
And a few years later, they lost out in Vietnam. See, the irony of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Then 71 was a real eye-opener for us. When we felt that, hey, was a democracy trying to bring in democracy in another country and everybody should be with us, Nixon sent his 7th Fleet.
Yeah.
So, you felt, there is something wrong. Are we reading it wrong? But, at that stage, I was just an ordinary civil servant. I was not in the business of intelligence. I didn't know. It was when I joined service in 72 and as I grew in the service, one began to realize how things are different from what is seen to be. And that there is always a story that is built up. Like we took for granted that, many of my friends took to smoking because they saw the Marlboro ad.
Yeah.
That cowboy sitting on a ledge.
That's
and from, imagery.
what
narrative.
What the millennials call swag right now. But before
Yes.
But before I come to Pramod, and I'm coming to you in a second, one thing which Mr. Sood said about reading the newspaper from the sports section, I don't think people have an adequate appreciation for growing in India if they don't get the newspaper and they don't start from the back pages. You always start from the back pages because those were your sport pages. You start from there and then move. And my friend used to always joke, you start from the reality and then you move away from the reality as you change one page up.
That's how it is actually.
And then you go to the headlines and it's the biggest farce of it all.
But now the first page is no longer page 1, Baba. It's page 6. First 6 pages are ads.
Ads. Absolutely.
2-page ads, and then you come to the newspaper.
So it's even truer now than it was. But Pramod, you had something to tell Mr. Sood. Yeah.
So was there a thought, even early on in your career, as to what we represented? Because you wouldn't have joined the R&AW unless there was an intrinsic trishna, as I call it, a search from within on what that identity you represent or what the nation was representing at that time. What was your initial thoughts? Did you think through this process?
Not quite that way, but 71, we had won the war, and Bangladesh had been born, and the R&AW had played a big hand in that. So there was the desire to join this new, mysterious, even glamorous outfit that's doing great things for the country.
Right.
Not the routine kind of work that we were doing. Here was an opportunity to do something different.
Right.
And so that was the
motivation to begin with.
Not that we knew what intelligence was going to be about, but here's an outfit that does things that one had heard of.
Yes.
I heard of James Bond, for instance.
Exactly. That was the 60s, right? Yeah.
We hadn't heard of George Smiley, but we had heard of Bond.
Yeah.
So that was the youth and the glamour.
And before I get Pramod, sorry. Before I get into
go ahead, Aadit.
See, this is what happens when two excited hosts are very intrigued about the topic. They try to say the same question at the same time. Yeah, Pramod, go ahead.
Yeah, the generally speaking, a SpyMaster, there is a template, there is a baseline, there is a template that most people have followed. There is a set precedent for everything. Very few intellectuals come out post-retirement or during the evolutionary period itself to understand this global game, the great game. When did that start happening with you?
Towards the second half of my career.
Okay.
First half was being the junior flunky, running around, running agents and collecting them, bringing them home, and all those operational details that go on with that. It's when you sit down to analyze at the desk, and you get in material from all sorts of places, and you know that this is not what it is. There's something more to it. Their motivation is different. They're saying something, they're meaning something else, and so on and so forth. So that's the time one started thinking, okay, what the New York Times is saying today will happen day after. Because they put that idea out, and now it's going to be circulated, picked up. I remember this happened in 1980. I think 80, just when they short of the Americans had been thrown out of Iran. Shah of Iran had been overthrown, and the American hold had gone. The Ayatollahs had taken over, and there were American prisoners in
Tehran.
Yeah. So there was a great movement on that there could be a war between Iraq and Iran. And the Iraqis were being pushed by the Americans, by the forces. And then there was a big meeting in one of the think tanks in London, where they said that if Saddam were to attack today, Iran could crumble. That was the bottom line. And 20th of September, Saddam Hussein attacked. Was it a coincidence? Or was it what he had read or what he'd been advised? We don't know. But the narrative had been created. And they fought an 8-year bloody war, which allowed the Americans to get back into the region.
My question, and I'll stop at that, and I'll let Aadit go on with the thing is, I'm trying to understand Vikram Sood's evolution. Was it self-experiential, or did you have gurus like B. Raman who pointed you at these aha moments? Look, I told you so. Or was it something that you concluded after having seen so many of such examples? Was there a process?
It is like this, Pramod. You always have somebody showing you the path. This is how things are. And I had B. Raman. I had the benefit of working closely with Gary Saxena, the chief. I worked closely with V. Balachandran. So if you want to learn something, you can learn. And that's where I got the idea from. That there's more to just collecting reports and filing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's much more to intelligence than this. It is how do you assess a situation based only on your reports and partly on what you see from outside. We don't have access to other information. We have only access to our own and published information. So you try and work out from there. The trick is they say that you will never get 100% information. You will get maybe, if you're lucky, 75 to 90% of the information. Your expertise lies in being able to, as they say, read behind the wall.
Yeah.
Given this data, how do you think the situation will work out? Then you must know how the mind of your chap works. What are his facilities? What are the interest? So we do an assessment on what the information you have.
And how that situation is going to affect us, even if it is unconnected, disconnected, or totally unrelated to us. How do we outflank that maneuver that could be laden with so many landmines? But I'll go at that later.
That is also a policy matter, not just an intelligence matter.
One very interesting thing I found out is that and you wrote this as when you wrote this very moving tribute to B. Raman on Relief in your piece, that intelligence officers in India don't write that many books, and that Mr. Raman had 3 books when he passed away. To his credit, itself was a very sort of a unique thing. But what is interesting I find is your books and B. Raman's last The Cowboys of Raw book give a very unique perspective into Raw, where B. Raman talks about the personalities and the missions itself, and you're talking about the grander macro sort of scale of Raw, where you're talking about the narratives that Raw has to build in cases, and where it has to deal with, where there are pre-existing narratives built about India and stuff in the West. So that perspective I felt almost was missing in Indian speak. Like, Indians have this notion about the SpyMasters and Raw Ki, everybody is some variation of Sunny Deol who goes to a country.
or Salman Khan.
So they go to a country and speak about 10 lines, pick up a couple of hand pumps and then just take everyone back home. But the diplomatic intrigue is everything in here. So in a country of ours where I would say 60-70% of the narrative is sort of based by according to popular cinema, how do you bust this narrative and get the real narrative across?
About the espionage?
Not just the espionage, the inner workings of it, like the whole narrative and diplomatic side of it.
No, I really don't get the question. I mean, there is an image. Okay, there is an image about espionage.
Right.
That, you go with your John Abraham and things like that.
No, so I'll rephrase my question a little bit. What I was really asking was, there is an image and there is the narrative that you sort of wrote in the book about, about. So is there sort of a challenge, like to focus on this, or like to bring this narrative out where people are like, oh, this is also happening? Or did you find that more people were receptive to what you had written in the book?
No, I think if there is a narrative of a particular kind existing about an organization, I wouldn't go out on my way to change it unless it is adverse.
I see.
है तो है.
है तो है. And why
you all kept it sexy.
Yeah, our friends across the border are scared, so let it be.
Absolutely.
They have reason to be scared. That's all right.
That is all right. I agree completely. So then moving on to the book itself, right? And one of the most fascinating part is in disclosure. We are in Houston, about 4 hours away from Dallas. The reason I made this disclosure is Mr. Sood's book starts with the
John Kennedy.
John Kennedy assassination. So for all our listeners who are wondering why I started with that, open the book, read the chapter on JFK assassination, and come back to what we are going to discuss. So there is this concept in Jainism called Anikantavad, which is one truth and many perspectives to it, right? JFK assassination is almost like that one truth of what we were told about Lee Harvey Oswald. And then there are multiple theories to it about what happened, the reasons it happened, what went through in that.
How many guns the shots were fired,
and
where did they come from?
Yeah, what angle were they shot from?
Yeah.
So I want you to go into a little bit of detail about what you saw or read in your research and why you said what you did in the book about the various theories of JFK.
Also, might you add, is there an official version of a case, again unrelated to, and does the agency actually document your version of what really happened for our officials to take a look for posterity's sake, or is this, well, this is what we thought happened?
You mean real cases which happen outside?
To our Indian establishment, if something happens outside, let's say JFK again, R&AW did not exist at that time, but had it happened,
even if it did not exist, this is actually a security aspect.
Yeah.
This is not an intelligence aspect.
Right.
In the sense that I was not treating it as a CIA/intelligence aspect. It is purely a internal security matter, which our intelligence bureau would be following very closely, how the assassination happened and all that. Of course, if you want to go, if there's external links, then you'd ask. Now you would ask the R&AW, then there was nobody else to ask. So when I built the narrative about JFK, I was building it purely from the perspective of how narratives are created, how they are removed from the truth. We really don't know the truth. Maybe this narrative is not accurate, but there are several narratives to the same event. So
there's no official report that R&AW would, at the end of the day, file for the Indian establishment or the political leadership to eventually say, well, this is what we have officially concluded. Again, just...
No, there would be a report that there would have been said lessons learned or what actually happened.
Right.
Whether we learn anything or not is another matter, but there would be a report.
For that,
yes.
For that, we probably need a third book called The Ultimate Lessons.
Yes.
But it's very interesting, right? Because these what you said about Indian history is very true. That sometimes you only focus on pre-British history and Indian history during the Great Britain, but a lot of our lessons learned or what we need to understand happened in the last 5 decades. And I almost don't see a lot of things written on contemporary history as I do see in the American sphere and stuff. So do you see sort of that dichotomy as well, that even within organizations there is a problem of that?
No, I think there is now greater stress on openly, not talking about intelligence agencies.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's more and more Indian writing about India, which is a very good thing.
Right.
A lot of us are writing. A lot of our foreign secretaries, foreign ministers are writing. You had some excellent work by some IAS officers and so on, and other people also. Anand Krishnan has written a very fascinating book on China.
Right.
So that means that we are now building an Indian perspective to the whole situation. That we are now going to evolve a narrative of our own, not be dependent on what is imported from outside, what others tell us about us. We still have that great love for being sort of approved by the West.
Yeah.
The good boy syndrome. The good boy.
Yeah. And that, he's thumped me on the back.
Yeah.
And like they're very excited about new book by Obama,
Yeah.
where he has written a few nice words about Manmohan Singh. So the
Yeah.
Congress is thrilled. Then written not something nice about Rahul Gandhi, so they are miffed about it. But he's not written about Narendra Modi, so they're
Narendra
very
Modi.
thrilled about it.
Happy.
they forget that the book is only up to 2011.
Yes.
He's going to write the next part after this,
Yeah.
which is
Yes.
probably all Modi.
Yeah.
Yes.
And,
Good or bad, it'll be there.
good or bad. And this whole, and honestly, like a lot of us have been here, have expressed skepticism about what US presidents say about Indian leaders and stuff even 20 years ago. But many then were like, "Acha, no, let's pay more attention to what happened." And now when Obama has written things about Rahul Gandhi, they're like, "Acha, let's not." Like
But he's talking rubbish. Let's not pay any attention to it.
Exactly.
Well, that's also dependent on the times we live in. It depends on the generation, like the Dhoni, the Virat Kohli, the Saurav Ganguly generation of politicians. So when you extrapolate to that, or for that matter, the young leadership that is developing, I'm very heartened to observe that we give it back equally. It just doesn't get
Yes,
the message doesn't get out there.
Yeah.
The narrative of how we are responding to very respectfully, not in an obtuse fashion. It's not out there yet.
Right.
No, it's very much the new thing now, I think, because as my schoolmaster used to say, that he judges the character of a boy from how he performs on the field, on the sports field.
Yes.
If he's going to make a try for it, if he's going to stand up, if he falls down and gets up again to fight, then he's going to make it. So this is the new Indian. The new Indian is not scared. He's not in awe of anybody. And many of our own people haven't yet understood this.
Yes.
We haven't understood that the guy on the street is probably smarter than we are. He hasn't had the opportunity, that's all.
Well, the proverbial politicians quote that the public बहुत smart है. ये कर्म सिद्धांत के ऊपर वो इनके पलट के इनके ऊपर ही आ गया. जब आप कहोगे कि politician smart, you keep saying कि ये इनको धोखा नहीं दे सकते, इनको सब कुछ सामने बताना पड़ता है. Actually, that has come out to the chickens have come out to roost.
Now it's happening because people realize, what have you done for me, kind of thing.
Yes.
So narratives will change unless the thrust of my book throughout is it's not a critique of the system. I'm not criticizing Americans or the British for what they did. They were running an empire. So they had to run it, and they didn't have the means to do it themselves. They didn't have that many troops to control all of India. So that they had to use Indians to run their empire.
Yes.
And they created a narrative of superiority about themselves so that we then become beholden to them to give us what is actually ours.
Yes.
And when the narrative was that we were poor, and then they left. Now, having made us poor, they accuse us of being poor.
Yes.
So the imagery is beggar on the street, charmer, those are stock shots.
It's poverty in perpetuity. That is exactly that the new the Western Empire has done, which is what the United States is. And you kind of talked about this, I think, in The Ultimate Goal, in the different chapters. The chapter I liked the most was, by the way, the God's Own Country. Where you did talk about you did talk about that. But go ahead, Aadit. Yeah, go ahead.
Before we even get there, Mr. Sood talked about the empire. And I have to sort of, give him props for one of the best phrases for the Middle East. Reluctant imperialists or empire by design is what you call them, right? For the Middle East.
Yeah.
And right now, Middle Eastern is in a bit of a crisis, not only because, and I quote a dialogue very memorably said in the West Wing, freedom and democracy are soon coming to a theater near you. That sentiment. and the other sentiment is of oil, that with the oil going down where it is and the world being in a very unusual year when they are all home, they are not traveling, the Middle East has been forced to look for alternatives. So how the reluctant empire deal with this, which is so dependent on just one economy?
They'll have to find other ways of doing it. They'll have to go to countries like India where they can have a market,
Absolutely.
where they can invest, where they can invest their money and get returns from it. Because if nobody is going to buy that much of oil as that was being sold, then they have to diversify.
Yeah.
And since they can't diversify quickly enough, they'll have to invest in countries like India.
And they have been ruling sort of with an iron fist almost on the popular, many things. So ultimately, when you are not providing economic growth to the populace, and there are issues on the social side, you will have a population also that is being ready to sort of, rebel against the dearly.
Yeah. But haven't you noticed some gradual change in some of these countries?
Yeah.
Sort of democratizing in a way, allowing some kinds of freedoms to their women, to the men.
Yeah.
So they'll have to do all that. But the thing is, you put the lid down so hard for so long, you can't lift it suddenly.
Absolutely.
It'll blow. So they'll have to let the steam out very slowly.
And the internet,
Go ahead.
Aadit, might I add that the internet has been of course it has negatives as well, but it has been a great harbinger of the common knowledge for prosperity. If the nuke and the note were the only two things that you need to secure your borders and make sure that there's no existential crisis, and you print notes, no country is asked why it is printing notes. Nobody asked the United States why they had two and a half or $3 trillion of stimulus, and it just got swallowed up between big corporations, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's asking any question of the United States. They are the big bully in the world. So once you get to know that there are 2 or 3 things that are essential for your economic prosperity, why do you need to have these kind of barriers? Especially with the Middle East, they will become trading partners in your own way, at your own terms. So do you see that Indian establishment has realized the precipice they are on right now, and the opportunities they are sitting on right now, if they realize what they already have? Do you see that happening?
We see that happening. We are on the cusp, and then you have COVID.
Yeah.
We are always being a country with a great promise.
Yes.
But something happened that pulls us back.
Yes.
And you had COVID, and then you had the Chinese marching into Ladakh.
Yes.
So there is an awareness. I don't know whether you've been to India recently or you go frequently to the villages. That's where India is changing really much more than here in the cities of India.
Yeah.
And the empowerment, the fact that the money is going to your bank account, the fact that the women have, even this gas chula is a great move.
Yes.
So that's why they get votes.
Right.
Yes.
And they still have to learn the art of administering. That I think is a weak link.
Yeah.
Right.
Governance is still a problem.
Completely agree. And delivery is probably more like we announce the schemes, announce the things, but delivery is where we lack sort of the most.
Exactly. This is what I said earlier on in one of my articles. I said Modi has great ideas.
Right.
They will do very well, but his problem is that the delivery systems are weak.
Yeah. And the difference was, and I have lived in Gujarat when he was the CM, and I mean here, but I come to India very often. One difference I think is in Gujarat, the delivery mechanism were seen by the CMO because it was a smaller area to manage, and sort of that's how they were cleared up. With India, the reforms or the changes need to be more structural because it's just not possible to oversee everything with the complexity over languages, regions, issues, and so forth. But Mr. Sood, before we get into the last home stretch, so to speak, to use an American phrase, the last 15 minutes, I have to start with a almost you foreshadowing what situation Europe is facing, about the perils of political correctness, you say, and the dealing that the European world has with political Islam. Now, when we say West and Islamists, a lot of people think about, America and stuff, but America has not been affected the same way as Europe has. And now the problem in Europe is it's not even at a macro level. It is at a micro level where you have small cities in Sweden, in France, in many countries that are being affected. So how does Europe deal with that? And how do we ensure that the right issues are being addressed?
There is in my book, I've got that quotation from Orania Falaci, the author of that book, The Rage, that the Islamist tells in a Vatican diocese that by our religion, by our democracy, we will come to you. By our religion, we will rule over you.
Wow.
Europe's problem has been immigration. Because it is not that the Muslims in France or Germany were always there. They were and even in Britain, it's the empire from where they came to settle in. And it's not always the first generation Muslim who is a firebrand. Funnily, it is now the guy who's born in those countries is becoming a firebrand, an extremist. And this business of letting them do what they like, letting them, appeasement is the shortcut to ruin. This is what they've done, and this is where they are now in a position that it's going to be very difficult to get out unless they do a very hard pushback.
So the unwillingness of the European world to ask the tough questions, talk about the uncomfortable issues, has now resulted in sort of a thing that they cannot control.
It's out in the open now.
Yeah. Because if you look at the riots that are happening over small things, it's unbelievable. In Sweden, in Malmo, what you saw.
Malmo is a Muslim town now.
Yeah. It's
one third or 2/3 Muslim.
Oh goodness, I did not know that the demographics have changed that much, but it's almost changing on a weekly or monthly basis, so to speak.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Pramod, I'm coming to you in a second. The last part of this discussion, I almost wanted us to talk about, which is almost the final part of your book as well. And we can sort of talk a little bit about the unending game, because we have to talk about the India story. That's what, we cannot go. And that's how you preface it as well. So if I were to ask you what has changed in the India story, if I was in the last 3 decades, because you observed the period from up till 2003 as from the inside. And since then, you have been ostensibly on the inside, but on the outside, looking at the macro sort of picture, right? Okay, Pramod is smiling and nodding. Now,
And that is because I remembered the famous adage: there is no retired spy. Yeah, but go ahead, Vikram.
Or are you trying to say if someone is retired, they are not a spy? If someone is a spy, they are never retired.
I just said there is a famous adage. Don't quote me on it.
Pardon our impertinence, Mr. Sood. Go ahead.
No, I think. No. Actually, it's a good joke. It's okay. I think the thing that has changed in our country, a lot has to do with communication.
Yeah.
When you give a villager a phone connection which costs him 1 rupee a call to wherever he wants to call, you've empowered him. He's been brought into the world. He can now check Bazaar ka dam He can check the movement of his son or daughter.
Absolutely.
You know, he's broken out of his shell.
Right.
And that is the communication revolution, the internet revolution, which is not our doing, but we've used it well, has brought this change. There are bad side effects, but that always happens. But this has brought about the change in our system. We've empowered a lot of people, and it has also put some kind of brakes on government riding roughshod. It took quite a while for R&AW Goswami to make his point.
Yeah.
But he did.
Yeah.
And he did it because he had the means of communication, which is probably, I'm giving a wrong example in the sense that because it was R&AW Goswami who could do it, another lesser man could not have been able to do it. That is also, but that is how life is. So it's a self-confidence. It is the growth of the B-town, the B-town boy and girl who have aspirations and who feel that they can make it. That is, and there is a lot of wealth in that.
So the India story almost is also sort of a big structural change that has happened, where it's been like an enabler, where everyone with a device or a phone or something is now directly being reached out to, or can directly reach out to X number of people. And that has sort of changed it up.
And with financial mobility, they travel, they see for themselves. You know, travels also, Air Deccan had a big role to play in it. People are after Chinese travelers, Indian travelers are they visit the Southeast Asian nation, they visit Europe, the most.
They go to Dubai, they go to Europe.
Yes.
And some of the companies are giving them paid holidays, so they make use of that. They turn up in Goa, they turn up in Pondicherry. So there is mobility and there is upward mobility, which is a great thing that has happened. And it's like the Indian cricket team has changed character. It's no longer from all boys from Bombay. It's from Nagpur, Chhattisgarh.
Yeah, it is because of fundamentals. Fundamentally, people are focusing on fundamentals. They're going behind. They're asking questions. That shackle has been broken all across. When I see kids asking their parents and the parents getting miffed at a pestering kid, I ask them to be patient with them. They're not asking anything out of the world. You just have to take a minute to answer them, and they will really respect that. If you silence them, that's the end of communication. But let me ask you one very tough question, a post-Diwali question. Do you have any regrets about your career or not having been able to do anything during that time at the service?
No, I not regret like that. Only sometimes you feel, maybe if I'd done it like this, could have been different. But
would that be part of a book that will get published in 25 years?
Never.
Okay.
Never. That was as categoric as answer we'll ever get.
Yes.
But it's fascinating. It's fascinating, that we from a world where, where the fact that we're being able to have this discussion, being in two different continents, through one link and so forth, is a sort of an homage to how the communication world and how things have changed.
Yes.
This would never happen 15 years ago. It just पहले तो connection ढूंढना पड़ता, international stable connection and all sort of things, right?
You know, when I started my career in intelligence, we used to get reports on the wireless, Morse code. It will take you 3-4 days. If you sent out an agent, you will get to know he's arrived after 10 days or 15 days or never.
Yeah.
So, but now you get your information in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. And
there's serious upgradation as far as technology is concerned. There's really a lot of things good things that are happening on keeping eyes on the financial mobilization and how
Yeah.
countries react.
Now I think the work of intelligence is going to be far tougher than it was even in my time. Internet had just started
Yeah.
barely in India at that time.
we still had the
It is only
dial-up
after I happily retired that everything changed.
Yes.
So one last question, and you've been very generous with your time, so thank you so much, Mr. Sood. But I have to ask you, if you had a wish of whether to be a spy in the age of the internet, or the age before you started, in the age of the 60s and the 70s, where you still had
60s and 70s, definitely. It was much more exciting.
much more exciting, you still had
It was
those
much more human. It was much more human.
Yeah, the whole advent of the microscopic dot. I was talking to someone the other day, and because I personally have read a lot of memoirs or and stuff like that, and the microscopic dot was a huge thing in the 50s and 60s, which would be zoomed in. And they're like, "What is that thing?" Someone asked me, and I just looked at him with incredulity. I was like, "What?"
Yes.
And I realized how it had disappeared from sort of popular culture and popular discussions as well.
Yeah.
Because in the age of internet,
Microfilms and micro dots are now no longer in vogue. But
who knows?
it's like that joke.
Now.
It's like that joke where two kids, teenage kids, are given an old dial phone, receiver, and they have to figure it out. They don't know what to do with it.
Absolutely.
They keep pressing those buttons and saying, nothing happens.
Nothing happens. I actually found out, Pramod, that there is a political party in Bihar. I forget which one. Their symbol, or Bihar, or maybe India's, their symbol is a dial phone. And I'm like,
I
wow,
see.
do the voters actually know that what is this? Because I told this to someone and they're like, are you talking about an iPhone? I'm like, no, they actually have a dial phone as their election symbol. So, Pramod, any closing comments before we let?
Yes, my closing comments is being an intellectual amongst the community, the intelligence community, must be the biggest burden, and you've unburdened some of it with the unending game and the ultimate goal. And what I like the most is, I guess this is where I really respect Vikramji, is the start of how a country, a civilization, a wounded civilization that, in spite of being 80% Indic or 85%, so to speak, Indic, it still chose to be a secular country. And there's this huge swath of people that want to find their identity. After all, the agency's motto is Dharmo Rakshate Rakshitaha. There must be some reason why that motto was chosen. It has deep significance. And you did talk about that in terms of, why cannot India be a Hindu Rashtra or Hindu nation, so to speak, with not formally declared, so to speak, but with a uniform civil code. Again, has this been a part of Vikram Sood's evolution post 80s, that you yourself came up to this, or what has this journey of yours been? I'd love to know about it.
This is post-retirement.
Yeah.
When you're in the intelligence agencies like mine, you're normally apolitical.
Yeah.
You just exercise your vote if you do, and you don't do any hard discussion beyond the usual gupshup that you have everywhere. There is no fixed feelings. It is after retirement, after I'd worked with the BJP government in my last few years, and the old imagery that BJP is like this, that wasn't there at all. They were very fine people, they were a pleasure to work with. They never pushed you around. They never asked you to do anything out of course, shall we say. So I had the best relationship with everybody that I worked with. Retired, I went home, and 2 years later I started writing articles and so on and so forth. And I think the change came after 2008, when we had Bombay,
Mm-hmm.
the attacks, and we did nothing after that.
Yeah.
And we just let it be. And then you even agreed that Pakistan was also a victim of terrorism.
Mm.
You know, I started feeling uneasy. I said, where are we heading?
Mm.
I mean, this is not secularism. This is allowing a certain idea to take over. It's in a way appeasement, power play for votes. So you don't worry if 170 died in that one single incident over in Mumbai. So, I mean, then you start evolving after that. And then the election campaigns started becoming nastier and nastier. Now, when you call an opposition leader Maud ka Saudagar, whether you like it or not, whether you like him or not, I thought that we were getting out of hand now. And I felt that maybe there is something to what people say. That Christians have their countries, Muslims have their countries, they call them Islamic. I don't even want India to be called the Hindu Republic of India. I just want it to be a Republic of India. And secularism is there inbuilt in our dharma. So why do you have to stress that? I have my religion, everybody else has their religion. You are free to practice your religion in my country. You're free to live. But why should there be, I even written in my book, that why do we have a minorities commission?
Yeah.
You can have what is called the affirmative action. You can have
A
but
truth
why
and
do you do this?
reconciliation, then affirmative action sort of a
And then
this thing,
you have incidents like the Sikh killings in 1984, and nothing happens. So this duality was not palatable, as it were. And the moment you started saying that, well, I think Modi should be given a chance, we were told, oh, so you're a Modi bug. Hare Baba, I'm not even a member of the party. But I'm really saying, try another guy. Yeah. You had these fellows for so many years. What have they done?
One of my favorite stories about that is when the statement Maut Ka Saudagar was uttered in the Gujarat Assembly elections. I think Mr. Modi, after the election, said that you are not hearing correctly. He meant vote ka Saudagar, she meant not Maut Ka Saudagar. But that's all humor and stuff. But what you summarize is truly the thrust of it all. That it does shape from a belief, an ideology based in practical realities of the world we are living in, and not of what we want, because what we want might be completely different, but we are stuck with what we have, and we have to make decisions from that and not from a position of utopia, right? And what you said about 2008, the tragedy is that most people have forgotten about Mumbai 2006, when there were bomb blasts in trains, and I think that we just had all these things taking place so fast, one after each other, that we have almost sort of become numb to bomb blasts and people dying. So in a post like
that is exactly why you need some central premises. And I was watching yesterday a video by Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev. Again, he's a very apolitical person, and there is a place he goes to. It's, I think, a Nalsar college or some college filled with young kids, idealistic young kids who wanted to know why they could not sing the national anthem sitting down, or not sing it at all. And he's 75 plus. He didn't have to go and debate young kids, but he did. He braved it, and the way in which he explained it really well, and in the end made it palatable to even the dissenting voice was very enchanting. Vikramji, I'll share the video with you, and that is what we need: the sagacious people who have really the lack of leadership is what I'm worried about in all spheres of life. The moral authority cannot be vested with the political leaders. It has different facets. The spiritual
It has to be societal.
Yeah.
It belongs to the society.
Right.
And you can't have mad fellows roaming around and saying that we'll go back to the 5th century BC and practice those things here. Now, I mean, the past is glorious.
Yes.
The past is not something that we have to hang on to forever.
Yes, and sit on.
We have to move on. I mean, the past was also ugly. Let's not forget it. The past was very ugly too at times.
Right.
So it's not all glory.
Yes.
It's not just Aryabhatta and stuff like that. It's a lot more to it. So let's learn from the past and move forward. Let's remember our heritage and move forward.
Yeah, not get stuck in the trappings of it all. Just move forward in a nice way.
Yeah, कि बस यही करना है मैंने और कुछ नहीं करना है. ऐसा ही करूँगा. And come out with corny statements that embarrass you as a rational 21st century human being. But,
Well, we usually end my podcast. Yeah, we usually end my podcast with book recommendations, and I have show recommendations. I have 2 books right now: The Unending Game, and Vikram Sood's current book, the the Ultimate Goal. You have to read both of them. Maybe we'll have one of these discussions in the future where we'll have some readers who've read these books with questions on them and sort of expand as a postscript to the books. But
that would be nice. I would like to do that because there's certain things I couldn't say with shortage of space.
Yeah. So maybe mind makers can take the lead in organizing that. We'll sort out questions, we'll seek out questions and stuff.
Yeah, you can work out questions in advance and we can sit down and talk about those questions.
Absolutely. So here you have it, guys. Please read, please write to us, and maybe in a month's time or so, we'll take Mr. Sood's time again and have one of these discussions. Thank you so much, sir. You've been kind with your time.
Thank you, Aadit. Thank you, Pramod.
Thank you, Vikramji. Thank you so much. Yes.
Take care.
Thank you.